Hello there.
Hello.
Hello,
So-
hello, hello.
Welcome to
Go ahead.
welcome to Unifying Force. I'm Kat, joined by Dave and Gio. How's it going?
Hi, everyone. Going absolutely well.
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Looking forward to this new TV series featuring this small character that's coming up on Disney Plus, is it?
Small character, small perhaps in stature at the beginning, but not so much more. Is we are here for episode 47, I
I
believe,
believe so, yeah.
of the Unifying Force, and we are going to be the origins and inspirations behind Ahsoka Tano. And this is one of our kind of struggle for the word for it. One of our contributions, one of our crossovers with the Virtual Cantina Network Summer of Snips. And if you did not know or do not know who Snips is, why are you watching this channel?
Look away now. Yeah.
But you will now, because Snips is the nickname given to Ahsoka Tano by her Jedi teacher, her Jedi master, Anakin Skywalker. So let's talk about it. Ahsoka, little character created by the maker himself, George Lucas and Dave Filoni. So kind of master and apprentice right there. And this is a character that's come from really both of them, and a character that I think many people see as like Dave Filoni's baby. Is Dave is very, very protective of Ahsoka, and that's one of the reasons why I think we're going to get her in live action, or we already have gotten her in live action. We're going to get more of her in live action in the upcoming Ahsoka show.
That's the reason that she's getting a show.
That's the reason she's getting a show. I think there are probably some other ones that are there, but yes, that's yeah.
Well, yeah, we are left with a lot of space in Star Wars. Well, when I say space, I mean time, the opposite dimension. Between how the way things are left in the Rebellion era at the end of Star Wars Rebels, and the fact that, we see her later in the Mandalorian Mandoverse, which is 5 years after Return of the Jedi, probably 7 years after Return of the Jedi at this time. And then you have another large gap, but we know her voice is part of the voices of the past Jedi that guide Rey to return to the world of the living and defeat Palpatine again. So there is ample room for them to write more Ahsoka stories, but I think the big question really is, I can ask this, maybe it'll sound controversial now in 2023, definitely as we look at August and with an Ahsoka show coming up, but did we need Ahsoka? Did Star Wars need Ahsoka Tano? And then the next question I'm going to say, because this is like an Origins episode, did the fans need Star Wars to have Ahsoka? And did us in 2008 need Anakin to have an apprentice to give us more time just to develop his character? Because I think that in answering those two questions, we'll pivot in and out and around the central thesis of today, which is the origins and inspirations behind Ahsoka. Why did we get Ahsoka? Did we deserve Ahsoka? No, that's a different time, different type of question.
We deserve. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. What's the impact that Ahsoka's had, and did Star Wars need Ahsoka as a kind of adrenalized shot in the arm to resurrect the franchise when it was a little bit dead in the water? And my opinion is clearly using that kind of macabre imagery that, yeah, I think it was a shot in the arm that Star Wars needed. And Filoni has been a shot in the arm that Lucasfilm needed. Definitely in this era of the last couple of years of Star Wars with The Mandalorian and so on. But also with the kind of energy and verve that Ashley Eckstein's Ahsoka brought to Star Wars, even if initially in 2008 she wasn't a popular character at all. And as we might have discussed in the watch-alongs, which is worth checking out on YouTube, the Virtual Cantina Network, the 2008 The Clone Wars film, not the best film ever. But its biggest contribution is probably bringing us this character.
So completely is, and we talked about just very recently, like Gio was saying, if you go back on the Virtual Cantina Network just this last week, in the Virtual Cantina watch along, we watched the Clone Wars movie, and we talked about the good and the not so good, the kind of silly. But yeah, that was our first introduction to.
You mean the bad?
Yes,
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
We obviously made the bad because we constantly had some little flybys from our friend Stinky the Hut over and over again in that episode. So if you missed it, go back and tune into that. But so let me. Yeah, this is a complicated question because did Star Wars need Ahsoka at the moment, and did it need that shot in the arm, and did that do anything? I don't know that if Ahsoka's introduction as a shot in the arm to the franchise did what they wanted it to, because like you said, is the fan base was highly divided when she came in. And see, she came in as like a 13 or 14-year-old orange alien wearing a short skirt and crop top. Okay, George Lucas and designing women's clothing. Just okay, George. Let somebody
problematic.
Yeah. We love you, George, but yeah, even Carrie Fisher would say you got a problem with that. But you know, the question I think is, is this a shot in the arm to, and who are we designing this character for? And it has been publicly said that this was one of those things that George designed, a character that George wanted to happen for his daughter. He wanted young female, young, strong, powerful female representation in Star Wars, which again has always been there. Carrie Fisher, the example, but wanted someone in this generation in this show that they could see themselves through. You know, you've got your teenage boys who see and identify with Anakin Skywalker because he is still Ahsoka's master, but he's very much a young Jedi learner, because you see Obi-Wan teaching him throughout this, throughout the Clone Wars show. So George for sure wanted a young girl in there that the young girls could identify with in this show. And did that work? Kind of, yeah. I see my daughters are not of an age that they were really able to identify with her, but I see girls of that age, like she was the Rey of that generation. And don't talk about how you will about Rey, but for girls of the right age, when The Force Awakens came out, Rey was really important character. What happened by the time we get to Rise of Skywalker, don't even get me started. But you know, Ahsoka, I think, filled that role, and by season two was filling that role well. Season one Ahsoka, Clone Wars movie Ahsoka. I think even Ashley Eckstein has come out and she's said, or she was saying at the time, because they were filming or they were creating the show, like a year ahead. So, while season 1 is going, they're already in the midst of season 2, and she's like, okay, just wait, people. Just wait. Just give her time. let her come into her own. So that's my take. I don't know what other people feel.
I thought the character had too long of a learning curve. It wasn't until like the end of season 3 that she started maturing a bit. Like the whole idea of, like you said, the kid in the short skirt and the crop top is like 13 running into a major battle zone and isn't even remotely affected by any of it. No, I checked out at that point. I'm like, I'm not buying it. It's too much. Especially since she wasn't acting like she wasn't. It didn't seem as disciplined as a lot of the other Jedi in the beginning. She seemed too much like a normal kid than somebody who had been raised in that Jedi environment where they basically try and strip you of most of your individuality and make you all like a sensei type person. She didn't seem that way at all, and I didn't buy that she would. Again, looking at something like the Geonosis arc in season 2, and just how heavy the combat is, and she's just like brushes right off her like it's nothing. I'm like, that bugged me a lot. And it seemed a little Disney-fied in a way, like, come on, guys, we could do it. And that didn't feel authentic to the character. It was kind of, I get what they were going for, like all the stuff you said. I'm like, okay, I get that. But she didn't start coming around until maybe the end of season 3 with, I think, the Wookiee Hunt episode. I'm like, okay, I'm starting to see something here. And then in season 4 and 5, it gets better. But it conflicts with canon a lot because clearly Anakin did not have an apprentice. You got to be a Jedi Master to have an apprentice, and they said, oh well, we break rules for the war and everything like that. But you could tell that everyone on the council still thought in Episode 3 that Anakin was still a bit immature, which is partly what was really making him upset. Like, well, then they're not going to give him an apprentice. The Anakin in Clone Wars is so much more mature and like almost wise beyond his years than the Anakin you see in Revenge of the Sith. Like, there was such a different thing going on there for the betterment of that character. So that felt a little off. And as we know, George Lucas wanted to kill her off at the end of Clone Wars because he thought that would be a way to really humanize how evil Darth Vader really was. Because as evil as Vader killing kids is, like, you only just met these kids like 2 seconds ago and just uniting the sabers. Like, you're not really getting sucked into it. And so it's kind of like a faceless villain in a way. So. And same with the Separatist Council. It's like, yeah, we kind of know him, but do we care that he's mowing him down? Not really. So how are you going to make the audience really feel the true evil of Vader? Have him kill somebody they love. And then because, George left Lucasfilm before that happened, Filoni changed his mind. Or no, Filoni is not so much changing his mind. Filoni did what he wanted to do to begin with, was to keep the character around. Which is why we're seeing, her pop up in Rebels, where I thought she was great. And now in Mandalorian, which is great, and probably will be a lot better in her own show. So that was kind of where my thoughts were about her. I mean, I've never been one to see myself in characters in much of anything. It's like I have movies from many countries around the world. I got a ton of foreign films, a ton of local films. I don't see myself in barely any of these characters for a myriad of reasons I'm not going to get into right now. So I've never really got the whole thing of why it's important. We have to see ourselves in it. It's like, okay, whatever. But that never.
But let me ask you: is that you as an adult, more mature film fan, or did that happen to you? Was that your take as a child? Because
as a kid, I didn't see myself in these characters. As a kid, it's like fun because you think as a kid, it's fun to watch it because it's Star Wars. I didn't really see myself in the characters, It's like, well, I'm not a Jedi, I'm not a monk, I'm not a soldier, I'm not, any of these things. But it was still fun to watch. Same with Indiana Jones. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not a professor at college, but he's really fun and cool to hang around with, right? I was like, I don't see myself in any of these characters, but and so it's like, okay, if people are into that kind of thing, cool. But for me, it was never really a thing. So,
see, I think you got to hit the right franchise at the right time, in the right time of your adolescence to get that and do what it is that they're wanting you to do. Like I was not there for Star Wars. I've said many times I saw Jedi in the theater as like 6-year-old, and then there's this huge gap and wasn't there. So I didn't really. I played with Star Wars figures. I love the figures, I think, but you're right. I wasn't identifying as a Jedi. I wasn't identifying as a rebel. It wasn't that. But when the Dukes of Hazzard TV show came out. Oh, these bunch of kids from like a hick town in the South driving around in a fast car and like jumping through the windows. And for the next however many years, to my parents' dismay, I did not enter the car through the door if the window was already open. and yeah, the trying to slide across the hood frowned upon in my household. It didn't go. It's not nearly that easy either. But I'm just saying that I think there is a group of girls that if they were the right age at the right time, they're watching Star Wars, whether they're watching it of their own volition or they're watching it because there's an adult or another child in their household that wants to, that Ahsoka was that person. I get like not just do I get just one lightsaber, I get two lightsabers, and I hope that's what happened. I hope that happened because of the level of painfulness that we had to sit through in season 1, 2.5 to get to the point where Ahsoka was palatable for us. Like I didn't get taken out of it that, oh, why would they give Anakin a Padawan or whatever. I thought it was hilarious that how impetuous she was, how hot-headed Ahsoka was, and how much she didn't listen to what her master told her, just echoed and just emphasized how much Anakin is doing the exact same thing. And you even get like Yoda and the council going, just kind of giving each other the side eye when she does something that it's like, that's what Anakin would have done last week.
Yeah. I agree with that. I buy that as well. I think that Ahsoka's an interesting concept that they brought to screen because it could have gone sideways very easily, and I guess we've kind of described how it kind of did initially, but that was also because it came out in the 2008 kind of feature film launch of the Clone Wars, which had a lot of problems going on. And there were lots of characters that we liked from the films that had existed before that seemed very hollow, very shallow, very underdeveloped, or just kind of not interesting at all for the 100 minutes of that film. So I don't blame too much of Ahsoka's early kind of disconnect on that film itself, but I do think that just a visual of having Ahsoka, like you guys have been saying, as, an orange alien in a crop top, looking like a 13, 14-year-old girl, and kind of being in Anakin's shadow and not really looking too daunted by the war that's going on around her. I did find it really jarring, and it wasn't until I think I'd seen and heard Ahsoka routinely enough, week on week, that by the end of the Clone Wars Season 1, I thought, all right, I can tolerate her. She's not my favorite character, but I'm willing to see where they go. And I knew at that point, I think Dave Filoni and George Lucas had said there'd be a couple of years guaranteed of the Clone Wars ahead, and they'd written out at least 4 seasons at the time, I believe is what they'd initially said in 2009 when the first season of the Clone Wars aired on Cartoon Network. But there are other factors as well, and that's one of them, Cartoon Network. So the Clone Wars was a Cartoon Network show. It wasn't a Disney Plus show. It wasn't a Disney XD show like Star Wars Rebels. It wasn't owned by Disney. And it had to fit in with the Saturday morning dynamic of Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
And that has its own kind of history and style. And that's also why I eventually forgave George Lucas for using what I thought were horrible CG models for the Clone Wars initially. I hated the look of the Clone Wars, the CG version. I had loved the Jedi Tartakovsky version of
the
Clone
2D,
Wars. The micro series, the Samurai Jack-esque Star Wars. That is, I mean, those are 3-minute episodes in the first season, and I feel like we could talk for an hour on about one 3-minute episode because there's so many things that happen in like 3 minutes of one of his projects that are homages to every kind of film and love letters to every genre and directors and writers we'll never have heard of. But that was such a high concept way of doing Star Wars, and I didn't appreciate all the artistic flair and the creativity behind the micro series, but I appreciated the use of location. There was a lot of good camera work in the 2D animation itself, which I thought would be great if they did it 3D at one point. And also the stylized, hyper-violent, mass-scale action. And when the Clone Wars film came along, I didn't see it in the cinema. It was a deliberate choice because we had the opportunity to go. We decided we'd watch it when it came on TV. And then we'd watch it with the Clone Wars series coming out a few weeks later. Everything about the Clone Wars Season 1 initially was a bit disappointing to me. The only thing that really kept me invested was the fact that I knew it was going to expand everything and develop characters. And one flaw lots of people had with the prequel trilogy is the undercookedness of Anakin, and therefore every part of Anakin's family and life and relationships. So Anakin to Obi-Wan, Anakin to Padme. That's why Attack of the Clones' romance is just paper thin. All those things could be enhanced, and the saga could be left in an overall much better position if the Clone Wars works well. And I was willing to give it all a go and kind of roll the dice because I knew that George Lucas was still heavily involved, and these were all his stories, and that Ahsoka was his idea. It wasn't like Dave Filoni maybe in 2007 was expecting a girl and thought, you know what, I want to put a female character in there for her. No, it came from George Lucas, exactly like you're saying. And I didn't know how directly a result his family in real life were on his work, because you don't hear that much with the original trilogy. You don't really hear.
You hear some things
too many
about
direct things.
like his daughter is okay. Don't crucify me for this one, or don't crucify the work for this one. Directly responsible for the Ewoks movies, because she loved the Ewoks. She was all about the creatures in like. George would have people dress up as Ewoks and just like, I don't know, come to birthday parties or something. Okay, I don't know if that's real, but I think I've heard it. I don't know.
I want it to be real now.
But yeah, so he's doing things directly for his daughter when she's that young, immediately following Return of the Jedi. And so I think it's completely believable. Even though it's a thing you hear on the internet, I've never heard it out of George's mouth, that he would create this character that would be a model and a vehicle vessel to get young girls interested in Star Wars. I buy it. I think it's there.
Yeah.
And I love that you're talking about how they had like this guarantee of how many seasons, because if the Clone Wars wasn't Star Wars, if that was some kind of startup Saturday morning cartoon on, Ahsoka would not be as important as she is today, because it would not have lasted that long. Season one is a slog to get through. I've done several rewatches of the entire Clone Wars saga.
Oh, really?
And getting through season 1, if you're gonna do it,
There are a few highlights.
well,
there's some good arcs.
I love the first episode. I think the first episode is the one where Yoda and Ventress are on the planet.
Yeah,
I love episode 1.
it is excellent. It's excellent.
And when I do the rewatch, I tend to end up watching episode 1 about 3 or 4 times because I'm restarting, because getting through like the second part of that season,
I like the first 7 episodes. Then the 9th and 10th episode. And then I can't remember much after that until the season finale, which was pretty good.
Yeah, I've never tracked exactly where I get lost in season 1. Is when I start over, is I'll start and I'll get lost, and I have a conscious memory of watching episode 1 over and over and over, but I've never tracked at what point in season 1 do I just get completely lost and start over.
Rookies was a good one too, and that was the 5th episode.
That is one of the standout episodes of all of Star Wars.
Yeah, there seemed to be a pattern where the ones that were clone-centric were really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
like
I
the
think
16th episode being the one with the clone traitor. That was another really good one. It's like every once in a while it kind of flares up, but yeah.
Well, and it's not that I think episode 1 is one of the reasons why it's great is not necessarily Yoda, but it's how Yoda is treating the individual clones
Right.
in that episode. So it kind of is a clone-centric episode, and you're getting to know more of these 5 individuals of these millions, and that's really what's making that.
Yeah.
But we digress.
But there's good stuff on Ahsoka even in the first season. You've got the you've got the Yoda heavy first episode, and it reintroduces Asajj Ventress for anyone who didn't see the micro series or the film. And then Ahsoka is heavily involved in the first arc, which is the rising and the destruction of the Malevolence ship arc, because that's it's a really good arc. That kind of 3-episode rising, shadow, and then destroying Malevolence. It's got Obi-Wan's on a mission. Anakin happens to be around, I think, this Shadow Squad to back them up. And it's kind of the first hunt for Grievous, the first of many. Plo Koon's involved. It's got all the side and supporting and star characters you could get. And it kind of encapsulates, I think, a lot of maybe the kind of stories that George Lucas and Dave Filoni wanted to tell together. Because
yeah, and if you're
big characters.
watching this, by the time this airs on Sunday, there will already have been another watch along on the Virtual Cantina Network where we're going to be watching season 1, episodes 9, 13, 14, 19, and 21, which are a lot of Ahsoka centric episodes that give you some of that character development. And you do notice that a lot of those are like that second half of the season, and that kind of part. We're watching, I think, Cloak of Darkness, Jedi Crash, Defenders of Peace, Storm over Ryloth, and Liberty on Ryloth. So, again, go back and look at the Virtual Cantina watch-alongs playlist right here on the Virtual Cantina Network, and you can find those. And then looking ahead in the next week, we'll be concentrating in the watch-along more on season 2, and actually kind of the first half of season 2 there, episodes 5, 6, 8, and 11 on those. So join us on all the content here in the Summer of Snips to learn more about Ahsoka. But like I said, I said this, we were talking about this in the preview show, we're calling this Summer of Snips because Snips is Anakin's nickname for Ahsoka. She's given that like right there in the Clone Wars movie. It's just because she's snippy and sarcastic and always has a response to him, and he has to give her a little nickname because she immediately starts making fun of his name like the second she meets the dude. She comes in and she starts calling him Sky Guy, which I think this is one of the best pieces of animation in the Clone Wars movie, is the look of annoyance on animated Anakin Skywalker's face when she calls him Sky Guy for the first time. And I think it's absolutely hilarious now, the relationship between Ashley Eckstein and Matt Lanter, that she constantly calls him Sky Guy in real life, in person, and I think that's just amusing. I think we owe a lot of the relationship between Ahsoka Tano and Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars to the kind of the gelling kind of relationship that those two voice actors have really created there. And James Arnold Taylor as well, the triumvirate of them, of Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan in that show is, in later seasons, gets to be a really cool deal. Um, so let's talk about like later seasons, because the last season of Clone Wars was basically created for a vehicle to explain Ahsoka Tano. Yes or no?
To explain her.
Well, to give you some more of her backstory between where the Clone Wars arc left off, and then she has this much more serious, much more mature arc in Rebels.
Uh,
The,
yeah.
you know, because remember, that's how it went. Is we had how many seasons of Clone Wars? Six seasons of
Well,
Clone
yeah,
Wars?
five and a half, kind
And
of.
five and a
Yeah.
half. Then we have Rebels. Then we have the last
Seventh,
season
yeah.
of Clone Wars to come back. And it just kind of explains how she got to be as mature as she was in Rebels. I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah,
It was
I
just a
think
vehicle. That's a Dave Filoni love letter to the character.
yeah. Well, I think Tales of the Jedi is also a love letter to the character in that way, and the way we heard them speak about Dave Filoni speak about how he really felt like it was homecoming, being able to tell another story about Ahsoka's life, whether it was at the beginning or closer to the end, at least of her journey that we've seen so far on screen. It was the coming together of the whole creative team behind the scenes that had worked on Ahsoka for so many years in the Clone Wars before it was cancelled, that he managed to bring back a lot of them together in the same rooms for Tales of the Jedi. And I think that's why I think Tales of the Jedi are very effective kind of mini movies in a way. And they are vignettes that kind of tell a snapshot of a Jedi's life in a significant way. We've got Ahsoka's home village, but then you've got, again, kind of filling in the blanks Ahsoka for when she's trying to make a name for herself. And we can also kind of talk about that aspect as well of how we had this idea of a story group being used by Disney, which doesn't seem to have been very consistent or very communicative with other parts of film studios. But there's a time where there was a lot of Ahsoka content being made by lots of different people. That includes the novel by, I believe, E.K. Johnson. And one part of the novel that I think drew a lot of people is some of the comments I think that Dave Filoni was quoted as having said about the novel. But I remember coming across the comments and thinking, maybe they've either the grammar's not great in these quotations, or someone's taking it's like clipping things out of context. Dave Filoni could be saying something about Ahsoka, his character, but because the novel's called Ahsoka, you could take the comments that are specific to his character and make them sound like he's talking about the book. And I feel like that could also be done for the TV series coming up, but that's just the problem with naming things just one word after a character. The other issue is the slight conflict in continuity between the story that's written on the page and the story that's portrayed on screen. And then I think we have some of that in the novel versus what we're led to believe happens in Tales of the Jedi, and between the Siege of Mandalore and her appearing as Fulcrum in season 2 of Rebels.
So a lot of my interpretation is, so I enjoyed the novel, and I didn't read the novel. I listened to it as an audio drama.
And it was narrated by a certain someone, wasn't it?
It was completely read in Ahsoka's voice by Ashley Eckstein. It's great. It was like sitting there listening to an episode of the Clone Wars. And I don't know if I'm in the minority, but I am at least one of the people that did not see Tales of the Jedi as a complete contradiction to the novel, but as an oversimplification of things that happen in the novel. Is Ahsoka is going by an assumed name. She's in these other villages. She's on this other planet. She's hiding out at the time, and she's kind of pulling an Obi-Wan. that we've seen in the Kenobi series at this point, which is she can't just lay low. And even though I'm no Jedi at that point, she's being a Jedi. She's helping out. She can't keep herself from doing that. And a lot of that you see in Tales could have been a really simplified version of her helping another group that was slightly different and way more developed in the novel. So I was just like, okay, this is a cartoon. It's X number of minutes. Is they took what she was doing and they made it that. They can exist at the same time. This is what somebody heard third hand about all of that, and that's the first person.
Right.
It
makes sense. That happens a lot with things that are meant to have been factually recorded in history, and there aren't primary sources. And if there aren't primary sources from the time that are contemporaneous, then it's going to come down to what sounds like anecdotes, and we know how reliable they can be. There's always going to be some extra coloring and bells and whistles attached. Do you think that... So I read this actually a little while, quite recently, but definitely before our conversation today, that Dave Filoni struggled to identify how he could make Ahsoka an empathetic character because he saw her as a juvenile kid that was going to be a distraction to Anakin when Anakin's meant to be a general in the Clone Wars. And so getting Anakin to realistically be able to fulfill his role as a general in the Grand Army of the Republic, while still being Obi-Wan's apprentice, but not officially an apprentice because he's a Jedi Knight now. But also the fact that, I don't know, does Dave Filoni have children now? I'm assuming he does, but this is going back to him talking about 2007, because 2008 is when the summer of 2008, I think August was when the Clone Wars film came out.
August
so it would have been,
Yeah, August 15th, 2008. Yeah.
2008. There you go. So it would have been a case of him. I don't know how old his children would have been then, or if he had children then, but he is quoted as having said he struggled to see how he could write a convincing female young character because he didn't relate to it in any sense. But George had given him this task of writing a realistic, I suppose realistic, I don't know, doesn't sound very realistic now. And I'm trying to imagine George Lucas actually sitting there with that task given to somebody. Write a female character, but make it realistic. Is that an admission of hubris on his part? He just
right,
and
himself. Not just write a female character, right? Like a 14-year-old female character. He's just like,
no. And let's turn up the SAS dial to 20 out of 10. But yeah, it's then that's why Dave Filoni, I think, insisted on trying to focus on the Jedi aspect of her. Is a paraphrasing of the source that I read about this quotations pulled out from an interview with Dave Filoni. So he wanted to focus more on the Jedi aspect of Ahsoka Tano because not only did he think it'd be more interesting, but as an individual writer and creator, he didn't know how to write a 14-year-old female lead character in a show, and he also didn't find a way that he felt comfortable making her fit in. And maybe that's why she really sticks out in the 2008 film. I'm not justifying it at all, but it does make more sense now thinking about that.
There were a lot of elements.
Reflecting.
There were a lot of things wrong with the 2008 film, not so much her. I mean, she didn't seem uniquely bad compared to,
all the
stuff that was in there.
For sure, actually, that's very true. We're giving Ahsoka 200 a hard time, even when we're saying we've been won over by her since.
Well, and I mean, he obviously has come to enjoy it, or come to grips with it because Dave wrote Tales. He wrote those early Ahsoka bits in the Tales of the Jedi, and I mean, he's one of those people that is integrating and putting all Star Wars things in. He's that Star Wars encyclopedia, every little nuance from here and there to throw an Easter egg. Because, like, was it in the Clone Wars movie? It may have been in the movie itself, where they're like, Anakin completely makes a knowledge to who would trust me with a Padawan. I'd probably like kill them or something. Aha. You know,
Wait, they say that?
I think it's alluded to. I really think it is. And people in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. I really think that it's when he's talking about at some point in the Clone Wars, maybe it's not in the movie, he's talking about like being trusted with a Padawan.
Mhm.
And it's like the nod to Anakin's future. Maybe I've hallucinated that.
Well, it's like in episode 2 when Obi-Wan says, "Why do I get the feeling you're going to be the
You're gonna be
death?"
the death of me. Yeah, I love that line.
And
I
again,
remember hearing people
where
groan, but I loved it.
they talk about in, I think is it episode 2 as well? They're talking about, you know, or it might have been, yeah, where the Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Palpatine, where the Palpatine rescue is, we will all share the same fate. Dies on the Death Star, dies on the Death Star, dies on the
Yep.
Death Star.
That's episode 3, yeah.
It's like, oh,
Mhm.
all of these things happen.
Oh, but remember, he came back and didn't die on the Death Star after all.
Well, we don't talk about that. we trying to
No, he died. He
block
died. He died. You know, he
Skywalker out of my brain. But
definitely
Gio brought
died.
up earlier is we hear Ahsoka's voice in Rise of Skywalker. Is she dead at that point?
Definitely.
I think everybody else we heard was dead at that point.
Well, she's kind of reaching out to the spirits of the Jedi, not, you know, so yeah, it probably.
Yeah. Doesn't Leia say to Rey, it's the voices of the past? There's a specific
Yeah,
phrase
it's
in
like
the
voices
film.
of the past or something, reaching out and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So
It reminded me of The Lion King a lot. And
I don't know. I am that guy that sits in there and listens to every time you hear Mufasa's voice doing the voiceover with Simba. I'm sitting there and whoever I'm watching with, Luke, I am your father.
yeah.
It's James or I'm that guy. It's like,
no, I am your father.
I am your father. But yeah, I do. Just to emphasize, and they're like, shut up. Stop it.
That was probably my favorite shot of episode 9 when it's a showing. She's trying to reach out, and all you see is just the stars. It's peaceful and it's quiet, and you have that nice little beautiful music beat by John Williams. So just add a starscape, like that's nice.
Yeah.
So I love the fan edit of that, where you actually get to see the people as Force ghosts that are talking to her, and that was such a. Why can a fan edit be better? But.
Well, like
But
that
then
meme I
again,
shared.
that's happened to George
the
too. For
deepfake
the
guy
fan
happened
Like that meme I shared the other day, you know? It's like, feel the force, Ray. Do it, Ray. And Anakin's like, what the heck? Palpatine's still alive? What do you mean the Emperor's back? That's a story for another time.
That is a story for another time. But yeah, so maybe Ahsoka has a finite run, and maybe we'll see a little bit more about what happens to her in the Ahsoka show. I think it's not really the place here. We're not really going to do predictions quite yet. It's early in the summer. There will be a giant Ahsoka prediction preview show on the VCN before then, where one or all of us may be on that show, with additionally the other hosts from other VCN shows going, hey, where does it go from here? What happens? What do we think is going to go? Who are we going to see? And I think as the summer goes on too, we'll be discussing other characters that we should see in the Ahsoka show. We know we're going to see Sabine Wren from Rebels. We know that we are going to see at least glimpses of Ezra Bridger. We know we're going to, yeah.
I guess I should save it for the prediction. I was saying I have a theory, an idea of where she's going to end up at the end of the entire Star Wars canon whenever they get there.
Okay. Yeah, that
Say it now
might
if
be
you want.
a save at one point. But yeah, and we're going to talk more about what a kind of mini prediction show, because I know on this show we're going to have to devote an entire episode to more of the Mortis arc. We've discussed Mortis before. We haven't discussed what's really going on with Mortis and how Mortis may impact and affect, other than superficially, the Ahsoka show, which I cannot imagine as large of a part that plays in Star Wars Rebels, that won't affect the Ahsoka show, because I mean people are calling this the next season of Star Wars Rebels, and they keep kind of giving us edges. I mean, we know Hera's there. We've seen Zeb come back in The Mandalorian, just as a cameo at this point, but we don't know what's going to happen. We've seen cameos all along of in different properties of Chopper, and we've seen him in the previews. So that's down the line, and things that we'll be talking about and seeing what happens with that. But let me ask this while we're talking about this. This may be the controversial question that'll get us off of that. Because of the last season of Clone Wars and what we see happen there, and the, spoiler alert, not spoiler alert, the battle, the next meeting of Ahsoka and Anakin in Rebels, how powerful was Ahsoka? Okay, we talk about she bounds out of the ship, this little 14-year-old in the crop top, and then you're like, oh my god. But by the time we see her in that last season of Clone Wars and in Rebels, is she as powerful as Anakin? Is she more powerful than Anakin?
I can't remember her power set by that point.
What's your definition of power? Do you mean like midichlorians per unit squared?
I mean, yes, it could be that. We've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but other than in main canon, in visual TV show, movies, whatever, Ahsoka is probably the only other Jedi we've seen as a child other than Anakin. Yeah?
Of the main characters, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So we've seen how she's stopping things with the Force as a baby.
Well, she also has her relationship with animals was also there when she was like a baby as well, toddler.
She's got that level of the Force. That's what they recognize. As we've seen Anakin with his Force abilities helping him pod race as a young child. But we see Ahsoka face down Vader and live. That barely does Obi-Wan survive.
In which fight?
Well, so
the season 2
until he
Rebels.
got the high ground, it was a rough battle. It was going back and forth. He gets the high ground, Anakin, bye, see ya, toodles. And then we get him again in the Kenobi fight, where
I'm talking Ahsoka. You said Ahsoka faced down Vader.
Ahsoka fighting Vader with the one where they mirrored for Kenobi, where she slashes the mask when they re-meet.
Twilight of the Apprentice.
But doesn't she lose that fight and she only lives because Ezra cheats and pulls her through the World Between Worlds portal?
See, that's what I thought happened in the final season of Rebels when
she got disarmed or something, and Vader was coming in for like the final blow or whatever, and then they left it ambiguous, and he's walking away with the mask busted. But then in World Between Worlds, the reason Ezra reaches in and grabs her is because he sees that Vader's going in for the killing blow. She's not going to be able to stop him.
But in my interpretation, yes. But that he's going to be in the killing blow or in the position of the killing blow because she won't kill him. Like Obi-Wan won't kill him. She recognizes that that's Anakin. Yeah. And she's, fought Vader at least to a draw, and she kind of quits. And then he's going to go and just... Maybe not. It's there's a lot of Star Wars that's from a certain point of view. Is I can completely see the other interpretation there that just Vader is going to kick the crap out of her, and it's. But I don't know.
I always saw it as kind of a tie. It was left deliberately ambiguously at the end of season 2, because you see them both pause together, breathe, recuperate, and slightly try and recover from the emotional devastation of reconnecting with each other by name. Because up until that point, Vader had just referred to Ahsoka as the apprentice lives. Hadn't said Ahsoka.
Right.
And she hadn't said Anakin. And I think there's a huge philosophical and historical thing in that as well, in that the power of someone's name is huge. If you just go back to when you've been a kid and you were at school, if you were ever in trouble, that's when you get called your name, often. Yes. Much more than,
and if you have 3 names, good reason. When you get called all 3 of them.
Yeah, or if you have a complicated name or an unusual name,
or if somebody knows your middle name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the childhood traumas coming back all at once. It's funny how people tend to, I guess, I don't know if it's a cultural thing, maybe it is, that you use someone's name when you want to get their attention, but for when things are really serious or dangerous. Like you'd hear, I know this for sure because I hear this all the time. If you take public transport in a big city, and there's a holiday, for example, between school holidays, there'll be a young mom with a couple of kids out and a stroller or something, and one of them will be of the age where they can interact and jump off a chair on a bus or a train and cause a bit of havoc. And that's the kid that the mom shouts the name of. You don't use the name otherwise. And I just found that really, really powerful when we'd had this knowledge of Ahsoka knowing Anakin's there from the beginning of season 2, when his Starfighter did the whole, look, it's pod racing. This is pod racing, spinning and going around, like causing complete chaos in the dogfight at the beginning of the attempt to return to Lothal and the siege that was going on there. And that's when Ahsoka kind of reaches out in the Force to find out why the Starfighter is so powerful, and it turns out to be Vader, and she collapses. She has that kind of psychic, I don't know, she has a loss of consciousness suddenly. She faints. And I always also wondered, is that Ahsoka being very powerful in the Force, that she connected with Vader in that instant, and then Vader did something back to her, like they have a bond?
Right.
I think the idea of bonds in the Force is something we could talk about in a whole new chapter, another show, another time. But you have that kind of idea of like a psychic link, let's just say. With Luke and Leia, we have that with any of the romantic couples that have been central to the Star Wars saga. And very clearly with Rey and Ren, one of the better aspects of the sequel trilogy is the mirroring they do of both other couples and then other like mythological, maybe love interest or people who are connected in like a spiritual or metaphysical way. And I think Ahsoka as a character has a lot of spirituality written into her from the beginning.
Well, obviously the origin of her name as well.
Exactly. So that's why I've tried to save it up for when we come full circle for this episode, because I think that when she connects with Vader and collapses in Rebels, having learned that Darth Vader and Anakin are one and the same and alive, and that's the reason why the war is ongoing and the Empire exists. You could say it's too much for her, she's overwhelmed. You could say maybe Vader does something to her. Well, what I'd like to think is that she was so powerfully connected to Darth Vader at that point because she remembered all the love and affection and bonds of kinship and like almost sibling love that she had with Anakin, that they all came back at the same time, which would emotionally overwhelm anyone. But in a spiritual sense, she realized she had to completely detach herself immediately. So she severed all the positive connections she'd ever made with Anakin in that one instance to ensure that he didn't have a view into the cockpit that she was in.
Right.
Because it's my understanding that the Force, with some people who are really connected for whatever reason, and you can kind of say that you see reflections of that in our world, the way we live now in modern times, but definitely in hero journey stories, mythological traditions in like ancient Greece and ancient Asia and things like that. When people have this kind of psychic bond or spiritual connection, it's also huge in some indigenous cultures, especially of the Americas, native and first peoples. When people are linked in that way, they can kind of almost see exactly what the other one is seeing and experiencing and smelling and touching and feeling. You have that very obviously done in The Last Jedi at a moment or two with the water drops on Kylo Ren's glove, for example, when he wipes his face. There's that element of being so spiritually and intimately close with somebody that you experience physically what they do at that moment. And I think it speaks to Ahsoka's complete power as an individual. Not her power level in the Force, but that too. That she was so able to empathize with Anakin, but then realize Darth Vader was an immediate, clear and present danger, and then surrender her connection to him entirely. And that's why when they meet a few months later, I think it's a few months later, by the end of season 2 of the Clone Wars, of Rebels, when they have that Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show moment that the Obi-Wan series lifted out of Twilight of the Apprentice,
Yeah.
where there's the duel and then the exposing of the Vader mask, and you hear the mixed Anakin and Vader human and mechanical voice. Again, that's loads of spiritual, philosophical things with that too. But again, it comes back to identity and the power of the name, the potency of memory, the kind of power of these kind of emotional connections that people have, and what effect they can still hold on to you even if those feelings either have been severed or laid dormant for years, or have something absolutely awful and traumatic attached that you've repressed and tried to hide and run from.
Well,
And
see,
that all comes to a head so much with Ahsoka in so many key moments. That's why I think her impact on the saga is irreplaceable and unlike any other character.
well, and I feel that her power level or how much that she's able to do in the Force or being a Jedi, not being a Jedi, it only gets more and more as the legend builds. Like we talked about, is the last season of the Clone Wars was written after Rebels, so they upped her power level a lot. Can you imagine anyone other than Anakin / Vader being able to plow through an entire ship full of clone troopers, being the enemy at that point and during Order 66? Anyone else other than Anakin Vader being able to do that? Yet, oh, here's Ahsoka. Yes, we do. Now,
I see what you mean now. Yeah.
You can see that
Maul.
one of the reasons why she could, well, yes, Maul. That's that from a completely separate place, though, because Maul does that through rage and just. Ahsoka makes it more difficult on herself because she doesn't want to kill them. She's trying to get through without just the mass carnage that Maul just like, okay, let's go.
Well, Vader brought mass carnage as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That Vader's going to go like hallway scene. Vader's going to go the comic version of Vader where you see, all I see is fear and dead men and looking out at this valley of the enemy, and he's just, we're gone. But Ahsoka manages to fight her way through that but it's not, and is it more powerful? Is it different? It's not in a way that Obi-Wan would have done it. Obi-Wan would have been very defensive. He would have, fought off a couple people close by and he'd run away, because that's his style and deal, and not like run away in a bad way, just like remove himself from the situation. But Ahsoka, full steam ahead, very reminiscent of Anakin. We're going to confront this head on, plow right through it, not from a certain point of view and circle around in an Obi-Wan kind of way. It's just why I see her as so much of an echo, and whether she would have become that, whether she would have been that way without being Anakin's apprentice, or whether she was conditioned to be that way because she was his Padawan. Don't know. But so we are at about that kind of place. Is we can ramble on, rattle on, talk about so many more aspects of Ahsoka Tano and how the character has become, and how they're uppowering her and they're bringing her up, and even I'm sure we'll talk about more of the live action Ahsoka, as with Rosario Dawson being a teacher to Luke Skywalker, who at this point we've seen, when she comes in with Luke, she's got the respect level here. And we know how powerful he is at that point, how powerful he's been seen. So much more to talk about, but this is a taste. This is a beginning, our first foray in the summer of Snips on Snips Ahsoka, and I'm looking forward to the Ahsoka series. I can't wait. I don't want to wish my summer away, but I want to know what happens, and I want to know what happens sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Well, if you had a World Between Worlds or a Wolf in a Door, then you could go back and forth, enjoy summer, and enjoy Ahsoka, and no time would have passed.
There you go. And I'm sure we will discuss that World Between Worlds and stuff more and later. So please thank you everybody for watching. Please join us for more of the Summer of Snips coming on all the shows. There's going to be a deep dive, I think, into Tales of the Jedi on the Jedi Archives. They're going to talk about that. There's going to be all sorts of stuff on Rebels Revisited, all the Ahsoka Rebels things there. I cannot imagine that at some point Daughters of the Galaxy is not going to dedicate an entire episode to Ahsoka from that female point of view, and answer those questions that we're like, do you really identify with? I don't know. So all of those things coming. We hope you join us here on the Virtual Cantina Network. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
Yeah, thank you all. May the Force be with you.